wonderful presenters. I am thrilled to have for this presentation titled Speech Differences, two people who are living, bringing life experiences to their understanding of the challenges and the technologies that this community faces. And that is Richard Cave. Richard is a speech and language pathologist based in the UK. He's a PhD candidate from the University College of London. He's a national advisor to Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, ambassador to the Mouth Cancer Foundation, and recipient of the 2022 Allied Professional Award from the International Alliance of ALS and the Motor Neuron Association. Richard works with Google, providing specialist SLP consultation to relate, Ephonia, Look to Speak, Activate, and Activate project. He also works with the Motor Neuron Disease Association, the leading nonprofit for people with ALS in the UK. And prior to that, prior to his work as a speech and language therapist, he worked for the IT industry for 18 years. In addition to that, we have Steve Cooper. And Steve is a lifelong resident of Maryland. He experienced a total laryngectomy, which is the removal of his larynx or voice box in February of 2019. Later that year, he had a tracheo-esophageal voice prosthesis implanted, and excuse my pronunciation on that, which allows him to speak. Steve owns and manages a wholesale food brokerage business. He's a board member of the Governor's Advisory Board for Telecommunication Relay in Maryland. He is also instrumental in running Lary's Speakeasy Laryngectomy Cancer Support Group, the Laryngectomy Club of Montgomery County, and worked with the International Association of Laryngectomees, and is a mentor for IMRM Angels Cancer Support Group. So Steve and Richard, we welcome you and are so delighted to have you company in this conversation. Richard, Steve, and my name is Jane Hager, and I work with Maryland Accessible Telecommunication. So Richard, Steve, and I met a few weeks ago and talked about preparing for this presentation. And what we decided is that rather than standing here and presenting statistical information, we really wanted to get everyone involved in a conversation and just open up our minds to thinking more about this particular group of people and the challenges that they face on an everyday level, especially how it involves technology. So one of the things that we were hoping to do is to ask all of our attendees to think about today. Think about how many devices you have in your home right now that you activate with your voice. Also think about, and if we could get maybe a show of hands about, just think for a moment, how many devices do you have? Oh, good, we've got the ASL interpreter on. Terrific. Thank you. So if you could just think about how many devices in your home you have operating right now that you're using your voice to activate. And then if we could get a show of hands for if it's between 1 and 3 devices, or how many people can, if you can just do a show of hands about how many devices in your home you're using by voice command, if it's between 1 and 3. Okay, and then, okay, thank you. And then if you're using more than 3, how many people out there are using more than 3 devices using voice command? Okay, so it just doesn't seem to be, okay. There's a few people out there that are pretty high tech and using a lot of voice command, but on the average, there are just a few people that are using voice command. I said about 3. Okay, great, thank you. But you know, as we know that we're using more and more voice-based technology, and if you think about just your everyday conversations and being on the phone and participating in voice meetings, Zoom meetings, and so forth, we're all depending on our voices all the time. If we don't have that, how are we going to work around that? And that's what we're excited to be learning about today. I'm going to share my screen and just show a couple of slides. I'm getting a message, the host participant, that my screen share is disabled.
I think you're okay, but let me double check here, Jane. Hold on. Yeah, it has you as a guest, but I'm making you a co-host right now. There you go.
Okay.
I also made the ASL interpreters co-host, so they should be able to go on camera now.
Not sure why I'm getting that. Now. Are you all seeing my slide okay? Okay, good. Okay, so just a couple of facts about speech disabilities in the US. The National Institute on Deafness and Other Communication Disorders cites 7.5 million people in the US that have trouble using their voices. 1 in 12 children, 3 to 17 years old, have a disorder related to speech, voice, language, or swallowing. 17.9 million adults over 18 report having problems with their voice in the past 12 months, and that was in March of 2024. There are over 3 million people in the US who stutter. Again, you know, we think about how much we're using voice-activated technology such as Google, Siri, Alexa. How many times have you said, "Hey, Google," today? How many times do you deal with voice-activated menus?
So sorry to interrupt. Should we be seeing your slide now, currently? Because I'm not seeing the slide. I don't think a few others are either, per the chat message.
Okay, not sure what's
I made it so
right.
you should be able to share, Jane. I'm so sorry, everyone, for the
Well,
technical.
okay, that's all right. I think I just closed it out. So I tell you what, that was about it anyway. I was just citing those statistics and asking those questions. And also the last slide just talked about stigmas. People that have disabilities in general feel often inferior, anxious, like they're not good enough. They're very anxious about things. They feel isolated. And this is really common among not only people who have speech disabilities, but for other people as well. I, as a person with severe hearing loss, often feel that way. So these are things that we need to think about when we're interacting with this population as well. With people that have this disability as well. And to give us more of a firsthand experience and get us thinking about that, I'm going to turn this over to Steve Cooper, who is going to share his story. So thank you, Steve.
Hi, this is Steve. Thank you, Jane, for that. I find, and it's no fault of anyone, but this is indicative of some of the challenges we have with accessibility, and it's the technical knowledge that we're even experiencing on this meeting, and and it really impacts my community, the non-standard speech community. Let's see, back in December of 2019, as you mentioned earlier, I had a total laryngectomy, which was the removal of my voice box or vocal cords, and it left me unable to speak. There are some solutions for most of the people in the laryngectomy community, not all. Initially, all laryngectomies, speaking of technology, the only thing we're able to use communicating is a whiteboard. We're not allowed to use any devices post-surgery. A voice prosthesis, if we have one, we can't use post-surgery. So I struggled for about 3 months with no voice, no ability to communicate. I was introduced to an electrolarynx, which is a device that vibrates. We place under the chin. When I press the button, it vibrates. The vibrations, I use my oral cavity to form the words. I'll just say a few words. Those of you, that are hearing individuals, you could hear it's not a normal sound. It was a challenge. And it was 3 months before I could barely get any words out with that. Very, very isolating. It creates a lot of emotional issues, depression, suicide rate is incredibly high in my community. It's over 5 times the general public. It wasn't until about 7 months later that I received my voice prosthesis, which is a little silicone device that's implanted in my throat, allows air to go into my mouth, and then I can form the words. I struggled early on. I mean, simple things. I couldn't talk to my doctor's office. They had no way of, well, I could email, but that was somewhat limited. I would call my insurance company, or my wife would call my insurance company. They refused to speak to her, even though we had a release on file. They said that they needed my permission to talk to her. And she kept yelling at them, "Don't you understand? He doesn't have a voice." Another challenge in my community is socioeconomic. A lot of the laryngectomies tend to be lower income, older. They don't have the access to technology, and it's a tremendous struggle just day to day to be able to communicate. Now, I have what people will say is a fairly good voice. It's, if you didn't see me on camera, you wouldn't know that I did not have vocal cords, but unfortunately, a lot of the devices today, my cell phone, what is ASR, automated speech recognition that's used everywhere doesn't understand my voice as a voice. It cannot pick it up a lot of times. The electrolarynx, they actually have sound canceling that cancels out the sound of the electrolarynx. So a lot of the ASR programs are useless. An example, FedEx. I cannot speak to FedEx. They do not have an option for a live operator, and their ASR, their speech recognition, is awful. It never understands me. These are just a few of the frustrations and how we're limited by technology. I do, it's just a challenge in our community. What it forces a lot of the people that are unable to communicate is they become isolated. They don't want to leave the house. They won't have interactions with others. There are some tools that are available. The most popular one through Relay, and it's in all 50 states in the United States, is the speech-to-speech service. If you're not familiar with it, it is a fantastic service for anyone with non-standard speech, laryngectomy, cerebral palsy, even with someone with a deaf accent, if they're attempting to talk on the phone but can't be understood. Speech-to-speech is a service where you're connected with a live operator. They're called communication assistants. The communication assistant is specially trained in non-standard speech, and they can offer, if the person I'm talking to can't understand me, the CA can repeat what I say. There's many options, but they can either repeat the entire conversation or only repeat when I can't be understood. But there's so many struggles we face, and it's getting better. Google's voice recognition is better than Apple's. I will say that, but they all have limitations. Hopefully, with time, AI will help improve this. But these are the challenges that we have to deal with on a daily basis. So, with that said, I'll like to turn it over to back to Jane or to Richard from here.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Yeah, this is
Oh.
Jane. Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
And if anyone has any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat or jot them down. I'd be happy to answer any questions I can. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, so this is Jane jumping in again about that. And thank you for mentioning that speech-to-speech service, Steve. In a lot of situations, that service is provided through video platforms. Skype was the first to be used by speech-to-speech services, and I think it's still the primary video platform that's used. Because this helps that speech-to-speech operator be able to see and get messages from the speech impaired person. They can actually write signed messages and hold them up to the screen or indicate through body language different things that they need to say. So, we think about this and how it relates to digital equity. And again, there's a foundation of skills that digital equity provides just for people to be able to have a voice. And also that voice is so often had through technology. And so getting those Chromebooks or iPads or wireless cell devices that have the technology to help produce voice is just super important for speech differences in that community. So Richard, thank you for joining us, and please, I know that you've got so much great information to share with us. I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Okay, well, thank you. And I just want to say thank you for asking me. It's been so interesting so far, and listening to Steve, I could listen to Steve all day. My name's Richard. I'm not from your state. I am from London, and I'm calling you from here in rainy London. And anytime you fancy coming, you would be welcome. So please come to London. And actually, I have cause for celebration because this is the first meeting I've been to since I became a candidate for PhD to actually getting a PhD. So I'm so happy to share that with you, and it's a relief. I used to have hair, and then I did my PhD. Anyway, that's all finished now. So I loved what Steve was saying, and my PhD is all about this, about equity of access to speech recognition technology. And what Steve said, and I wrote it down, said that it's no fault of anyone. And I completely agree with this, that when we find that Alexa or Siri or Google Assistant does not understand how we talk, that's not our fault. It's actually a technical problem. It's a technical limitation. But in my research, often people felt it was something to do with them. So they took responsibility for what was actually a technical problem. And it's a really difficult thing to manage, to allocate responsibility for something like speech recognition failure if we don't know the limits of this technology and if we don't know the strengths of it. And just to position this is that as part of Google research when I was there, that the estimate is that there are around 250 million people in the world that have what's called non-standard speech, speech that is different from what the technology expects or has been trained to expect. And actually, the truth of it is that it's far more than that, because for people with transitory conditions, maybe they're in rehabilitation or they're unwell for a period of time, speech recognition technology probably not going to understand them so well. And also around the world, there are different levels of reporting and awareness of who has say cerebral palsy or has surgery or has hearing loss. So it's much higher, I think, than people may think. And the question is, Steve mentioned non-standard speech. And I've spent the longest time to try and find out where that came from, what it is. I'm a speech language pathologist by trade, and this is not a speech language pathologist term, and it's not a linguist term either. It turns out that it's a term that the technology companies use to differentiate between where their technology works in speech recognition and where it doesn't. And it's interesting. So the closest I could find to what non-standard speech was I looked it up using ChatGPT to see what it thought and others. And it says, non-standard speech refers to variations in spoken language that deviate from the conventional norms of pronunciation, grammar, or vocabulary. This includes regional dialects, accents, speech impairments, non-native pronunciations, and such variations can impact speech recognition systems, which are often trained on standard or well-defined linguistic inputs. So that means that pretty much all of us have non-standard speech, including me, because I have an English accent, and for sort of I have a South London English accent, and so for me, speech recognition technology may not work as well as, say, if I lived in the Midwest. And it's, in terms of research, it's the evidence is there that for people who have significant different accents, say, or who are non-native speakers of a language, they will have a less good experience of speech recognition. And speakers from, say, Scotland, which is not too far away from me here, or Welsh, will have a lower performance than speakers from the US. And in terms of ethnicity and diversity, there are clear-cut differences between performance of speech recognition tools. So for people who are Afro-American, speech recognition is likely to be less good than for people who are white, and that's the evidence is already there. So there are lots and lots of different reasons why speech recognition is not equal across so many dimensions. And so why does this matter? Well, because access to this type of technology should be for everyone across the world, and it's on all our phones. And by the end of this year, the forecast is that there will be more things that you can interact using your speech than there are people on the planet. And it's not just phones or Siri or Google Assistant. It's white goods. It's our fridges, TVs, it's our cars. And interestingly, downstairs in my kitchen here in South London, I could talk to my fridge and ask it to adjust the thermostat if I wanted to. And I've just recently I bought a car. It's a Spanish car, and in it there is a voice recognition system that, in order to wake it up, you don't say, "Hey car," or Alexa, or whatever. You say, "Hola, hola," which is, Spanish for hello, hello. But my South London English Spanish accent is not good enough for my car, even though I own the bleeding thing. So it's just, I'm laughing, but it's just like, hang on a second, we got stuff to talk about here. And Steve also mentioned about the effects of kind of exclusion of this technology, and it could contribute to a sense of isolation, and worse, use the word depression, which is not used lightly, and worse. And this is, in my world, I work with often people with ALS whose voice will change and be lost. And it's the same. I hear these exact same words in lots of communities. And so this matters on a personal level in terms of a sense of identity, but also on a kind of a role level. For example, speech recognition is sometimes used to automatically evaluate candidate interviews, or for transcription, automatic transcription of courtroom proceedings. And those are very, very important life events. There's an increased risk that if we live with the speech that we have and the speech that we use, and that's fine, that the technology can somehow not match to the words that we say. And it has nothing to do with the words that we use or anything about us. It's not about us at all. It's about the technology. And yet the impacts can affect us. And Steve mentioned about calls, meet calls, conference calls, about how the technology can actually kind of blank out somebody who's using an electrolarynx or has change in voice. And one of the projects I worked on at Google with one of Steve's colleagues was working on exactly that, that she found that her voice, her electrolarynx voice, was being treated as background noise in a Google Meet. And therefore her voice was literally being blanked out because the formula decided it wasn't speech. So we spent a long time on that. And what I've learnt from that experience and many others is that if we understand where the responsibilities lie, whether it's the technology or whether it's us, then I think it's really important for us to move forward with that. So I'm here to say that most of the issues that we experience with speech that is different and speech recognition services not recognizable is about the technology. And therefore, I think there are three things to think about here. The first is that recognizing that it's not us. The second thing is having something else available in the moment, just like Steve has, to ensure that our message is understood by other. And the third thing is being really a lot more advocating to say actually to Google, to Apple, to Meta, wherever, that actually this is not good enough. We need to use this technology and we can't. And what are you going to do to help us to actually change it? Because as far as I can tell, that is the best way, although it's a lot of work and it's no quick fix. And the very last thing I'm going to say for this part is that this problem of speech recognition for non-standard speech is not going away. I do quite a lot of work in Africa, and in Africa they're building more speech recognition models for languages that are commonly used there. But even today, I can tell you that they are not building for non-standard speech. They're building for speech that is considered as standard, and that is happening today. And so the problem is not getting smaller. And I seem to spend my entire working life now pointing this out to various people, and my work at the university here in London is on is on finding ways to include others, so that we don't just talk about standard or non-standard speech. We talk about everyone. Jane, I think I've gone on for so long now.
Richard, it's been absolutely wonderful hearing this information. And I love that you talk about the fact that speech recognition is not at all nearly as good as we want. I, as a person with severe hearing loss, depend on a lot of different automated speech recognition software. And advice that I always give to people is that you, as the participating communication partner, need to have your eyes on this information as well. It only takes a misunderstanding of one or two words to completely throw off the meaning of what's being said. And it can be in a very dangerous way. For example, if a number were misunderstood in a medication dosage. The other thing that I really appreciate you talking about is the building of the technology and the need to take these things into consideration at the birth of them, which I know is something that's being championed by a professor, John Lazar at University of Maryland, with his work in born accessibility. But that's absolutely, you know, as we embrace a future that's dependent on technology, and we as a community of people who have differing needs, different abilities, we need to really be there voicing our needs and making sure that we're included as this gets built. So thank you so much for your valued expertise and your information. And if anyone has comments or questions, please feel free to join us in this discussion. We would really love to hear from you. Steve, I see your hand up. Please,
Yes,
please go ahead.
a couple of things that came up during this. First of all, Richard, you saying it's a rainy day in London, so in other words, it's just a normal day. Sorry, I had to get that in there. You know, as we were discussing this, something came to mind for people on this webinar and others that might view it later, is a very basic question. Is your organization using ASR? So many people have gone to it. It eliminates live operators. You know, it's the ultimate solution, but it's created a huge problem. Jane led, spoke to it. Richard spoke to it. So, you know, is your organization using ASR? Okay. Is it working as the users? You know, maybe try and take a poll, you know, is it effective? Is it causing frustration? The other thing then I wanted to add to dovetail on that, do you provide another option? Email, apps. I'll share a brief story with you. I mentioned post-surgery. My wife was talking to my health insurance company. They wouldn't speak to her. We demanded an email address as part of accessibility so that I could communicate with them. They did not have, they claimed they did not have one. It was only later, after ironically complaining on Facebook, that someone reached out to me that I was able to email with. But my goodness, a healthcare provider won't make accommodations with someone with a health issue so that they can communicate. You can't make this stuff up, you know. We're creating the barriers. Richard said it's not us. It's the technology. it's the corporation or it's the system that, thinks they have a better solution. It might be a solution for that company or that organization, but it's certainly not a solution for all users.
Yeah.
And Deb posted in the chat, that was the reverse process, automated text to speech in various languages. I'll pass that back to Richard or someone else, but
Deb, I love that question. And actually, at the moment, it's very current because text to speech into various languages. I don't know about automated though, but for people that use text to speech, there's this new technology that just come out, well, for us anyway, called 11 Labs, where you can actually you can record your speech and it will emulate how you sound, and you can type a message and it will come out with high authenticity, I would add. But if you record your speech in one language using 11 Labs, you can actually type in 31 others. So it just gives that to you for free. The only difficulty here is that it's not likely, at least I haven't tried it, for automated text to speech. But if you wanted to do typed or other form text to speech, then it's just there and it's available. And here in the UK, for the MND Association, the non-profit I'm with, we give it away for free because it's just so powerful. Yes, I can put the link, Deb. I can.
actually, Richard, I put it in there, 11labs.io.
Yeah.
And I want to add, I have a friend who's a glossectomy. She has no tongue, so she is not able to speak at all. Fortunately, she had a lot of recordings of her voice prior to her surgery, and she's using. Oh, I'm sorry, didn't put it in the chat properly. 11labs.io. Richard, if you put that in, that'd be great. And she was able to use the voice banking, and she sounds amazing. So she's doing the text to speech through her cell phone. She uses a wearable microphone, wearable speaker, and it's just amazing. But she's limited to, two issues. She's limited to how fast she can type, and that's a problem I struggle with. Someone asked mentioned the caption phones or I have trouble with the apps or with text to speech apps. Imagine trying to type your conversation that you have all day long. It's tedious. And for me, I tend to be, 10 sentences behind where the conversation is. The other issue with a text to speech app or that uses your voice banking is you have to have a voice banked. When I had my surgery because of cancer on the vocal cords, and by the time it was discovered, I had no voice. So voice banking wasn't an option for me, but 11 Labs is one of the premier, there are many, but one of the premier text-to-speech apps, especially when it comes to voice banking, that's available.
And Steve and Richard, I don't know how familiar our audience is with, the text to speech as well as voice banking. Could you both elaborate on that a little bit more in case people aren't familiar with it?
Go on, Steve.
Well, Richard, this is Steve. I was going to say I'll turn it over to Richard.
Oh, yeah. So it's a voice banking, as it's called, is a way to create a synthetic approximation of your natural speech. And it can be done very quickly these days. In fact, the one I'm going to play you mine, which I created with 30 seconds of my speech. And it could be a recording, or it could be just talking. It could be anything. And so I'm just going to, having picked myself up on that, I'm going to have to do it now. Right, let's say share sound. Right, let's see if I can. Can you see my screen? It should
Yes.
say. Okay.
Yeah.
So this is, I created this voice bank, a synthetic version of my voice using 30 seconds of my speech. And it created something called Richard Instant. And I'm going to use it to invite you to come to my lovely city. Oh, let's have a, well, that's good, isn't it? Hang on a second. I think it's because I'll just restart that. See if we're here. Go to Richard. Which I've got another one here. Richard Thursday, which is what I made earlier today. So here we go. Hi, I'm so happy to be speaking with you from rainy London town. Please come and visit us. Yeah. So that was made from 30 seconds, and it kind of gets better from there. But what Steve was saying is exactly right. So that, you know, there is a delay when you use text to speech, and you know, kind of you kind of feel like sometimes you're missing out on what you want to say, and you're limited by the technology for what you end up saying. Yeah, Steve.
Richard, what are the top 11 labs? What are, you know, I guess, well, not Siri, but Google's the transcription app. But what are the top apps in the text to speech and speech to text arena that come to mind?
Yes, and I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to talk about that, and then I forgot. So I worked on a project called Project Relate, where you can train. This is a free app where you can train a speech recognition model to better understand how you talk. And the idea is that it will try to caption your speech as you say it in real time on the phone or on a screen of your choice. And so people who are listening to you have an additional option to help you be understood. And the idea is to be able to keep talking in real time and be understood in real time. And I actually have a short video of a colleague, somebody I worked with here in London, using it. And it's kind of a Google video, but I think it's quite nice. And it just take 2 minutes to run if we have time.
Absolutely. Please. Yeah, that would be great.
Okay.
I think it's a good example of what, you know, technology can do. Thanks. Thank you, Richard.
Okay. Let me just find it.
While you're pulling that up, this is Steve. I started using on Android Live Transcribe, and it's a phenomenal program. It's blazing fast, and sometimes it can recognize speech that might be non-standard. I am just blown away with that app, and it's a free app through Android.
Yeah. All right. So I'm just sharing my screen now, and I'll just start playing it. So this is somebody I work with.
It's
Red
recording
lights.
now, I'm
Red
ready.
lights on. Okay, go. Roll them. Did you get the whole atmosphere as well to catch
With the train, okay.
the train and the platform?
Never good. My whole life I've been good. I'm Alan, about 7. I'm a bit of a travel drunkard. Traveled around Europe and to Africa, the West Indies, and the Far East. I used to work on the railway for most of my career, so every day I was traveling on the train, so I was traveling on duty and off duty. I used to take the kids to work with me on the train sometimes. My husband to places in Europe with other kids I've only seen on TV. The main obstacle with traveling now is my condition has split my limbs to some extent. In 2018, I had a bluefectomy,
Oh, thank you.
which is removal of the tongue, and I didn't see it coming.
So where was this? Prague.
My sister Susan volunteered to be my carer and made a commitment to help me. I try and do as much as I can for myself and just also to do the things I have to do, especially making phone calls.
Are you going out at all on Friday?
I have no fitness.
So it's at home though?
At home, and I'm going for a party in the afternoon.
Oh,
Sometimes it can be exasperating. Some people might not understand it, but I have to go back to the only way to survive. I'm always looking for new ways to improve. I heard that Project Relate through my speech therapist. It looked interesting and exciting. It was really high-tech. Relate is a support tool to help me communicate. I use the repeat feature to help people to understand me. So I say what I'm going to say, and I press the red button and it repeats it back. Are you ready for lunch?
Are you ready for lunch?
I'm always looking for more opportunities to use it, because that's the only way to improve.
Alan's approach to life is just amazing, and I wish I could be more like that. Every day's a bonus. That's what he says when people ask him how he is.
I'm deciding about July 2017. I thought it might be a bit more relaxed, but I think life is just as fair as ever. The moment I get out of bed, it's like finding a starting pistol. I'm always looking at my watch, trying to achieve as much as I can in the day. I just went back to go to the food bank where I work on Wednesday. It's satisfying helping people, and I know when I need help in whatever capacity, people help me. So I know what a benefit it could be. So I'd like to do the same for other people.
Project Relate is really already helping Alan, and it can only get better. This will really help. Project Relate is the way forward.
Every day is a challenge, but that helps me to be better understood. It's a sense of freedom.
I'm coming, Daddy.
All right. So just
Thank you, Richard. That was great. Yeah. I don't know. I always have my caption on. I don't know whether others had theirs on or not, but watching the contrast and talking about the accuracy of automated speech recognition and how it shows up on my captioning as opposed to how it shows up after using a tool like Project Relate is just remarkable, just amazing. But, so, well, I think we're kind of around wrapping it up. It's 2:00 and is there any questions anyone has or comments anyone wants to make? I really appreciate you and Steve being here and joining our conversation. And as we had said in some talk that we've had in the past, putting the needs of people with speech differences in the minds of more people across the country and the world is really important to bringing and moving all of us forward as we grow technology. So thank you all so much for being here. And
Yeah, this is Steve. Jane, one last thing, Richard and I, we put our email addresses in the chat. If anyone has any questions, wanted to follow up, maybe has any events where they wanted us to speak again, we'd be honored to. And I want to thank you, Jane, for all of your just never-ending hard work. I wish everybody knew what you have been putting into this community. It's I'm getting a little emotional even talking about it. So thank you and everyone for listening to us.
absolutely, we've got some real champions here. Absolutely, a great pleasure. Such good work. All right. Well, it's pretty cool, as a friend of mine would say, sharing smiles across the miles and sharing great information across the nations. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll be sending out slide decks from today, just a simple 5 slides. You didn't miss anything by not seeing them, but it does have Richard and Steve's contact information on the last one. And also this is going to be recorded and posted for anyone that wants to view it later. So I think that's about it. And again, thanks so much for all the great work that both of you do. Richard, have a great rest of your rainy evening in London. Hope to see you soon. Bye-bye.